Thank you for the lovely introduction, and what a crowd. Thank you very much. Oh, thank you. In Arabic. Impressive. So I've been here for 2 days now in Indiana, and I've been to several universities, so I'm spoiled a little bit. I used to have a clicker, and they would used to give me a microphone. So now I have a lovely lady that is helping me now. She's trying to navigate the PowerPoint. They will go forward. But really, what I will try to talk to you about is I'll try to unpackage the situation in Syria, what happened, and especially concentrate on the results. I will try to give you a brief background about myself, how I became technically a refugee, and how I came to the United States, and really explain to you the journey of a lot of refugees and explain the life of IDPs, that are internally displaced people that are still in Syria but displaced from their homes and had to leave their homes. But first, I would love to give a brief presentation about the Multifaith Alliance for Syrian Refugees and how I got involved with it and how this group is doing such a magnificent work in the United States and around the world. The Multifaith Alliance actually was a very interesting start. The most unusual thing for a Syrian to work with. It started as some Jewish groups gathered together and saw that they had the moral obligation to respond to what's happening in Syria because of the history of the Jewish people and what happened during the Holocaust. And that's where I encountered the first time. It was a big shock for me coming from the Middle East. You know, the Middle East, there is old animosity between especially Jews and Muslims and Christian, goes back probably 2,000 years ago. But some have overcome their differences. And of course, for me, the change was this interaction with the Multi-Faith Alliance that have morphed after that to become an umbrella that had 80 faith-based groups and secular groups from all groups and faiths around the United States. So now we are so blessed that we have, Jewish, Christian, Sikhs, Muslim groups, and secular groups, and other religions working together to try to help and aid Syria's war victims. And now we can go to the next slide. This is Syria, so a lot of people will probably hear a lot of the things I'm saying and wonder what does he mean? Where are people going? So Syria, this is really the heart of the Middle East, and Syria is in the heart of the Middle East. It's bordered by Turkey from the north, Jordan from the south, Iraq from the east, and the Mediterranean and Lebanon, and there's this small place with the Golan Heights, and then there's Israel and the Palestinian territory. So that's where Syria is. And I was born 44 years ago now in a city called Aleppo in Syria. And Aleppo is, it became famous after the "what is Aleppo" phrase with the candidate for president that didn't know what is Aleppo. So Aleppo is this small city with 3.5 million inhabitants. And the north of Syria is the most populous city in Syria and one of the most ancient continuously inhabited cities in the world. And we have a competition with our capital, Damascus, who is the first inhabited city in the world. So you have the competition between two cities in Syria, one in the south, one in the north. So this is how ancient this land is. It's a lot of civilizations have came through Syria, from the Roman Empire to the Alexander the Great, so to of course the Muslim states, to the Ottomans, and of course what's the shape of Syria now. When I was working actually as a general manager in a hospital in Syria in 2011, and in 2010 I was watching what was unfolding around us in the Middle East and North Africa. The first events of what is called now the Arab Spring started in Tunisia, where a vegetable merchant was selling his stuff, and the police confiscated his vegetables. And when he demanded that their release, a policewoman slapped him. Enraged, in protest, he poured gasoline on himself and burned himself, and that became the spark of what's known the Arab Spring. In Tunisia, people went in demonstration. Their leaders fled the country, and we were seeing events unfolding in other states across from Libya to Egypt to Yemen, and we never saw that it will come to Syria, to tell you the truth. I've been all my adult life, I've known one family to rule Syria. That's the last name is Assad. So it was like the father at the beginning, then the son. So we never thought that change would come. But regardless of that, some school children in the southern town of Daraa, that's here on the small triangle close to the Golan in Jordan, wrote some graffiti affected by what they heard in these in TVs, and they had this thing: people want to overthrow the regime. Regardless of that, the head of the security apparatus there ordered their arrest. They were arrested, they were beaten, the elders came, and their parents wanted their release. His response was very blunt response. He told them, forget about your children, go back home, sleep with your wives and make new children. And if you can't do so, I'll send my men, they'll sleep with your wife and they'll make new children. So in every probably society, this will be a very outrageous comment from a police chief, but in Syria it was double that. It was a conservative society, so that was very outrageous. And people went out in demonstrations. The response was shootings, people got killed. Their funerals became new demonstrations. And what was different between now and the 80s and the 90s, that we have social media, we have YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and of course, each and one of us have a video camera in his pocket. So everyone would film what's happening and upload it on YouTube. So these images transferred around Syria, and other cities got into demonstrations, and things evolved. I was there witnessing what's going on, and then what got me involved is one reason. In Aleppo, if you wanted to demonstrate in Syria, you had two options. You had either to go to a place of worship, either to go from university. And the reason why, because Syria is under martial law or, for the last 50 years. So you can't gather more than 10 people. If you want to have even a birthday party, you have to get a permit from the authorities. So in my hometown in Aleppo, it was the university that was the main hub for such demonstrations. So what we were seeing people demonstration getting hurt. But at the same time, if they come to our facility to ask for assistance, we have to inform the authority, and most of the time they will come and be picked up immediately. They weren't be able to continue their treatment. So that put us as a conflict. What would we do? Should we leave these people not to get treatment? So we established something called, something like secret facilities that would help these wounded and help these people hurt to get treatment. That, of course, put me at odds with the government. And after a year of working, our network was discovered, and I had to flee the country. So technically, I became, all of a sudden became an activist, then I became all of a sudden a refugee. So I had to move to Turkey, and from Turkey I went to the Balkan, where I had previously, like a decade ago, I have established a manufacturing business. But actually what started when I left was early on when the refugee crisis started to unfold. So what happened is, as the demonstration became more militarized, as more people picked up arms, it turned from a civilian unrest to a military conflict. And that made a lot of people vulnerable, because now there was more heavy artillery was used, airplanes were used, and it was a war. So a lot of people would try to go into safety. So they will try to go either to border areas around the north or the south, or they would go inside and became refugees. So refugees technically are people who are fleeing prosecution and have crossed into neighboring countries. And IDPs, people who are stayed inside their home state but are outside their town or neighborhood or wherever they used to live. And what started as a very few numbers morphed into the most horrific statistics we have out there. So in 5 years, the life expectancy of Syrians have dropped 20 years. Imagine this number. You know, I'm going to leave this number, and probably everyone is saying them, but I'm going to talk to you about the number of refugees. So Syria is between 20 to 22 million population. The refugee population was about 5 million. It's exactly 4.8 million. The whole refugee population in the world is 21 million. So actually, Syrian refugee constitute almost 25% of the refugee population on the world. But there is another number is out there that's 60 million, but 60 million is the number of displaced people. That's including refugees. So we have additional 40 million that are people displaced inside their countries. While refugees, people who are fled, are 20 million. The other number that is very staggering for Syria is that between 6 and 7 million are displaced people inside their country. So imagine, out of these 20 million, more than half are displaced in some way or another. And if you look at the population of Indiana, I guess it was like 6.7 million, something like that, Indiana. So imagine if the whole state of Indiana was displaced, or 60% of the population of the United States were either refugees or displaced. That's what happened to Syria, actually, and that's what happened to Syria. And now people try to flee somewhere, to make safety somewhere. And that continued until 2015, mid-2015. And this number, 5 million, haven't increased since then. And people will think, oh, then things are fine in Syria, right? If there are no more refugees are coming out, that means the situation is stable. Actually, the reason they're not coming out, or there is an increase, is because everyone have sealed their borders. So Turkey has sealed its border because it couldn't sustain 2.2 million refugees on its territory. Jordan has about 800,000, and Lebanon, actually, which is a very small country, about between 5 and 6 million, 20% of its population are Syrian refugees. So you can imagine if any country have 20% of its population. And so they just stopped accepting more refugees. So this is why we see the number of IDPs increasing bit by bit. Can we go to the next slide, please? So what happened? What's the choices that people had? They stayed, they didn't have any choice, but the people who already left, most of them in these neighboring countries can't work. And even the lucky ones who work illegally. Some countries would offer education, but most of them can't afford to go to their schools or buy any supplies, so they couldn't get any education. But most of them, especially in Turkey, which is a non-Arabic speaking country, they can't go there because they don't speak the language. So maybe they can go in Jordan and Lebanon, but in Turkey, which we have 2.2, there is a language barrier that they can't go to. So what happened? There was an outcry on the world stage that we need to help Syrian refugees because this was the biggest humanitarian crisis since the Second World War. So the UN asked for the resettlement, the emergency resettlement of 130,000 Syrian refugees. And usually, traditionally, the United States would take 50% of this number, and that's 65%. But of course, at that time, that by then there was this rise of ISIS and the fear that's going on. So it actually was very hard for the previous administration to accept Syrian refugees. So this is actually something that not a lot of people talk about. Everyone thought that somehow there was open door policies for Syrian refugees to come into the United States. That wasn't the case any time. In 2011, there was about 34 Syrian refugees admitted to the United States. The same number, almost the same number in 2012 and 2013 and 2014. The biggest increase came, and if you can see the numbers, from 2011, 15,700 were resettled to the United States, but 12,000 were resettled in fiscal year 2016. In the previous 4 years, 2,500. And actually, the biggest number was in 2015. So why is that? The reason behind that the United States was coming from a reevaluation of its vetting system, especially for Iraqi refugees, because of one incident regarding 2 refugees. So it did a very extensive vetting mechanism for Iraqi refugees and Syrian refugees, that the level of vetting, like what we call now extreme vetting. So the refugees had to go through an extensive vetting period that took between 18 to 24 months. That included, first of all, you have to be a refugee registered by the UN. Second of all, you have to interview UN agent who, when you go to this interview, people thought that somehow a refugee will pick where he wants to go. That's not the case. You know, you go, you don't know where they're going to refer you to. So then they will call you after they interview. They will call you, said you got referred to the United States or Canada or other country, and that's when the process of vetting starts for Syrians. So you would have interviews. So for instance, let me give you an example of a recently resettled Syrian family in Michigan, not Michigan City, but the state and the Metro Detroit. And I was talking to them and I asked them, how many interviews did they do? He said, well, at the beginning they did 4 interviews with us. And I said, is it an interview? He said, well, more as an interrogation, not an interview. And what they do, they said the agents from the United States. And what they do, they interview the family together and they interviewed the children separately. And the children were between the age of 13 and 6 years old. So they will check if there is any discrepancy between the parents and the children, they will disqualify them. So about 50% of all people who are interviewed and checked, they will be disqualified. And then they will go to the next stage. So the next stage will be fingerprints, biometrics, eye, and sometimes even taking DNA tests from children and from parents to confirm they are relatives of their children, of their parents. And of course, all original documents are required. Then they go through the system of all branches of Homeland Security, even including the CIA. And that's after this whole process is done and after they get their security clearance, they have to go then through the medical clearance because no one wants to be brought here that has any diseases. This is why it takes between 18 and 24 months. And all of this happens abroad. No one comes here before they go through this screening. So that's what happened to Syrian refugees coming here. And you see there is a different response. So for instance, the UK have accepted only 2,659 Syrian refugees. But the British government, because of a lot of criticism, have increased this number recently to 20,000 in 4 years. So they will accept 5,000. But Canada have accepted 35,000. Now they have surpassed 40,000 Syrian refugees actually in Canada. So in reality, even if you stop, or if we stop the Syrian refugees coming to the US, technically they're already here. We have 40,000 Syrian refugees already in Canada. And I guess it's not that hard for someone from Canada to cross into the United States. I know it from my home state in Michigan. You can take a boat and be in Canada like in 15 minutes. So unless we want to build a wall with Canada, I don't think there's any, any possibility of Syrians not coming into, if someone wants to do harms, coming in from Canada. Then there is 2 other numbers that you see down there. But look at the words. This is the main difference. And this is the main difference between Europe and the United States, because there's lots of mixing. Look what happened in Europe. What's going on in Europe? Look the word, asylum. And you can see in Sweden, for instance, they accepted 110,000 asylum seekers. In Germany, 450,000. And what does asylum mean? What's the difference? Can you go to the next slide? Yeah, thank you. This is what's happened in Europe. This is the crossing point between Greece and Macedonia. So what happened, there was a breakdown of borders in Europe. So all of a sudden, hundreds of thousands of people showed up using boats and came into Europe. So what happened is actually these people were not vetted. No one knew who was coming. And actually people thought that, oh, all of them are Syrians. But people like me and my colleagues who were native Syrians and works on the ground, we knew that not everyone was Syrian. And people thought like 70 to 80% are Syrian. When we talked to people, we understood that maybe it will be 30, 40%. And what turned out to be that we have the right statistics. After these folks go in, the Europeans put them in centers that they register, and then after they're in the country, the vetting process starts. Start the interviews, the medical checks, and all this procedure. But they are already in the country. So that's the difference between the vetting system in the US and the resettlement process and asylum. In the US, no one comes here before they screened and checked and guaranteed 100% that they are not risk to the United States. But that's not the case in Germany or in Europe in general. And it turned out that in 2015, that was the biggest influx of people coming into Europe. Only 29% actually were Syrian. And the other 70% were people from all over the world. But because we had this horrific image of a young toddler washing up on Turkey's shore, I don't know if you recognize it, the kid with the toddler with the red shirt, Elian. So there was a lot of sympathy with Syrian refugees. So everyone wanted to say, I'm a Syrian refugee. So he would get his asylum process much faster. Okay. So that's the situation when people were crossing. The borders were open. So it was easier to go this way than to go through if you had a visa or something, because the Greek authorities and all the authorities want to push them to Sweden and Germany. They didn't want them at their territory. Just go. So it continued like this until March 2016. Then it stopped. Everyone closed their borders in Europe. They said, no, that's it, we can't. Why is that? We had Paris. So all of a sudden, we had all this sympathy from everyone because of this toddler. Then we have all this scare, and everyone is frightened, from Syrian refugees especially. And why is that? Because there was a report that the Syrian passport were in place of one of the attacks. But the reality is, all the attackers of the Paris massacre, or what happened there, were actually European nationals. They were born in Europe. None of them were from Syria or refugees in general. But in reality, we had 70,000 people stuck in such condition. I called it the sea of mud. You can go there and you'll see fields of mud. And this is where people lived. And 14,000 people lived in this camp. And the only aid they got was, this line was for a loaf of bread, this big. This is what they got. And some medical attention, but not extensive. And everyone that had to get food, either they have to buy it, or there was groups, volunteers that would go and provide them food, because most of them didn't have enough money to stay for weeks and weeks and months. They just had enough money to make it where they wanted to go, where they had relatives or people they know. So the Europeans was in like, what do we do? And we were one of the groups that we were working on both fronts. We were working in the United States and in Europe. And we told them, well, there is a system that is working, that is humane, and you can identify real refugees, the people who are in need. Because remember, we can't resettle 5 million people or all the refugees in the world. What the UN is asking, and what organizations were asking, is to identify the most vulnerable, the people who really need this aid, to take them to a place where they can restart their lives. And there are some refugees that are better off than others. So we told them it's resettlement. It's called resettlement. Look at the United States. Look at Canada. They have a system, a vetting system that is secure, that is people come in here. And the most important thing, that it's not risky because 3,000 people died, drowned, trying to get to safety to Europe. 3,000 people. So actually people were dying trying to make this trip. So why are we risking these people? Why are we helping smuggling networks that they don't care about the safety of these refugees? The only thing they care about is getting money and deceiving them sometimes, and sometimes robbing them of their life savings. Why don't we identify people who are in need and bring them directly to your countries after they are vetted? So this way you will help the vulnerable and you won't get the security risk. Of course, that was what started implementing in Greece, and they called it relocation, where the European Union applied 160 spots so they can disperse these refugees that are stuck around their countries across the European Union. And of course, they would accept resettled refugees from the UN. And we were very happy, of course, until the US started saying that our system really is not secure. And it was really a shock because the data didn't show that it's not secure. So, this is how people got into the Europe and other places. But really, I want to emphasize one thing, and then I'll go about these fears that people had and why people said, didn't want any refugees. So that's very important statistics that we need to understand. An average conflict goes on for 37 years. Internal displacement goes for 23 years. An average refugee goes for 17 years. Can you go back a little bit more? No, not back, forward. I'm sorry, I have to navigate that. Yeah, go another one.
Another one?
Yeah, 3. Another one, another one. Another one, here. So, I told you how long it takes for a conflict and resettled refugees. So, this is a picture I took of one of the not official refugee camps in Turkey. Only 10% of refugees actually live in refugee camps. 90% are called urban refugees that live somewhere in the world. But I want you to remember this picture and remember the look on these kids. These kids have no education, have no prospects, no housing, nothing whatsoever. And they're going to continue to be like this for the next 17 years. Please remember that when I tell you about the fears that we are afraid of. Can you go back now a little bit? One more? Here. Thank you. So we identified 3 fears that people are worried about. One is the economic impact. Some people are just worried, why do we have to pay so much? We have so many people that impoverished in our community. It's going to take too much of our resources. We don't need that. Actually, the 3 most affected countries in this conflict, where they had larger percentages of refugees than the US ever had. You see that, for instance, Lebanon have an increase in GDP 2%, and actually in 2018 the projected increase is 3.5%. Turkey had an annual increase in its GDP 3%. Jordan had also a 3% increase. So we see that refugees actually weren't a drain on the economy, actually on the opposite. It had an economic benefit, because refugees are not economic immigrants. Refugees are people who had to flee because of a war, because of prosecution. So a lot of them had education, had finances, they were entrepreneurs that opened new businesses. So if you go, for instance, I'll give you an example about the Zaatari camp in Jordan. And it's one of the biggest camps. I think it's the second or third camp in the world. And if you go down the street, there is a street that crosses the Zaatari camp, and it's called the Champs-Élysées. I don't know if you know what's the Champs-Élysées. Champs-Élysées is one of the most prestigious streets in Paris, and for shopping. And it was called because there was a clinic run by the French. So they called the street the Champs-Élysées. And if you go on both sides, you will see shop after shop after shop. Inside the camp, you will see even wedding gowns are offered inside the camps. You will see coffee shops inside the camp. So you will see like a robust economy with people that had nothing, but they made business. So that's what refugees are about. So actually and even statistics here in the US that after 6 months refugees will not be dependent on any aid. Actually, they will be net contributors to the society. So they will start working and start paying taxes. And as I mentioned, the resettlement process here in the US, some people also think that we are giving them too much. Let me explain a little bit how much refugees receive. So we buy them a ticket. Of course, during the vetting process, they're on their own. They're taking care of themselves. No one is paying them. They're staying where they are. But when they had to travel, you get them the ticket, but they have to pay it back. They have to pay it back in 3.5 years. There is a limit. They have to do it. And the other thing is resettlement agencies, when they come here, they'll pay them their rent for 3 months. After that, they have to work. So this is why they work. That's what they have to do. That's the reality. If you compare it to other places like in Germany they actually train them, they teach them the language, they continue to support them, give them full housing, and actually they give them salaries for as long as 2 years. So you can compare the two countries and how benefits they get. So if in reality any refugee if he's coming because of benefits, he would go to Germany. He wouldn't come to the United States. Even Canada offers benefits for 1 year, $1,000 for each refugee. So the United States doesn't give a lot of benefits. So it's not something people are coming here for benefits, but coming here for the opportunity that the United States provide for work and jobs. The other thing is the fear of terrorism, security risk. These folks are coming here and we're going to bring our enemy to our house and they're going to kill us. Well, but the facts doesn't support him. First of all, was 800,000 refugees resettled in total to the United States since 9/11. We have 10 incidents of people who are prosecuted because they have terror links. Actually, no one did any terror activity. All of them were mainly funding related. They sent money to someone or some group that is related to terror. None of them was Syrian. And actually, the Kyoto Institute did a study, and it's a conservative institute, of what's the probability of someone being killed according to his visa category. What they found out that if you hold a refugee visa, the probability of an American being killed by such a person is 1 in 3.6 billion with a B. And at the same time, they found out that the probability of you being killed by fellow American citizen is 1 in 400,000. So it's very, very few incidents that happened with refugees that ever came in through the refugee resettlement process. And like I mentioned, only about funding some group that is not sanctioned to give aid to. The other one is Islamophobia. Some people think that somehow we have an invasion. We have an invasion of Muslims trying to come and take over our country, change our constitution, make us live under Sharia law or whatever thing they have in mind. And that's not a sentiment that's only here in the United States, but we have it actually very strongly in Europe. So when pollsters asked the French, what's the percentage of Muslims in France? And most of the French told them, well, it's 31%. This is what the figure that everyone saw that Muslims constitute of the French. In reality, it's 7%. But people have this fear and perception somehow is taking over. And actually, in 15 years, the increase is going to be 1%. And in the United States, even smaller. It's about 6 million Muslims that you have. And what the other statistics that they found, that when Muslims come into a different country, different Western countries with its value system, they become like them. They change, even if they are of how many children they have. So if a family would have 4 children if they lived somewhere in the Muslim world, when they came to the United States, for instance, in Europe, you'll see them having 2 kids, 1 kid. So they will be very similar, and very similar to the populations that they live with. And probably before this crisis, no one knew that, for instance, Syrians, there is more than 4,000 Syrian physicians across the United States. Probably a lot of people didn't know that his physician was Syrian, but he was treating you, saving your life, but at the same time you will go out. I don't want these Syrians in my home because they're going to kill me. Well, they were saving you like 2 seconds ago. So really, and the reason for that is people really haven't seen Syrians because they didn't notice them, because they could be your next door neighbor and you didn't notice because there was no difference. And Muslims in general, Muslims are different. It's like any other religion, Christianity or Judaism. You have a conservative Muslims, you have a liberal Muslims, you have a practicing religious, you have only a person who believes but doesn't practice. The same as Christianity, the same as Judaism. But somehow people think everyone is ISIS. Everyone wants to kill. No, that's a percentage, that's people, and some people hold these ideas. But how do we confront coming here? Do we tell everyone we don't care, we don't want them in, we don't want to help them? Well then, let me go back to the picture of the kids. Then we're actually sowing the seeds of this risk. Because these kids, after 17 years, if all they hear that no one cares about them and no one wants them because they are Syrians or because they are Muslims, this is how they see the world. That's what we are doing. We are fighting an evil idea. You could kill as many people as we want, but at the end of the day, it's the idea that matters. Who we are as a nation, what's our values, and what's our ideals. Are we like them? No, we're not. We're better than them. We are a nation of immigrants. People who came here, who had nothing, and who have built a great nation. And I think this is the path that we should continue to have. Because that's what's important. That's how you defeat an evil enemy like these radical groups. But if you try to make it a conflict between religions, we will all lose. No one will benefit. And we will lose more because we have more to lose. They have less to lose. So we have to be very aware. And we have to be very smart in how to react to crisis and make this balance between our values and our security. One thing is that it is very important for people to understand that everyone should care about our security, but that shouldn't be to eradicate our values. That's when we lose our security and our values together. So this is really what I come and try to explain to you, the statistics and facts. So you can talk to anyone who have these fears and have these really worries about what is going on and why we shouldn't care and why we shouldn't get involved, and try to explain to him, no, that's not the case. We should be active and we should be involved and we should do something to change what's going on, even in a faraway place. Because let me tell you, a decade ago, I was living in Europe, and I was taught that, why do I care if there's an economic crisis with mortgages in the United States? It turned out I should care, because we had a terrible recession in Europe that is still ongoing until now. The world has become such a small village. such a small world, that sometimes event that you think in the furthest corner of the world that wouldn't affect you. The Syrian crisis, everyone thought wouldn't affect anyone. But look now, you have a rise of extreme right groups in Europe. You have a destabilization in the whole of the European Union. It might fall apart. You have Brexit. I don't want to talk about the effects here in the United States, but a lot of things have affected because of this and the lack of reaction to this problem. So we really have to think and look at the world in a totally different manner and look at it in a more pragmatic way and try to find a solution, a smart solution, to stay safe and keep our values. Thank you very much for listening to me. And Jeanette, I know that you are the one to speak after me. So please, thank you very much.